for our closing session of the day. Please welcome President and CEO for Hilton, Christopher Nassetta, for a discussion with Skift founder and CEO Rafat Ali.
Thank you, Chris, for being here.
Great to be with you. Before we get started, I did want to voice one small complaint, or really a question for you. I want to know, I was here last in 2019. By the way, it's fabulous to see some well, I can't say smiling faces because I can't see their mouths, but nice to see a lot of people in the room. But did I do something wrong?
To be the last speaker of the day?
In 2019 to get the 5:30 p.m. slot?
It might be that.
I would have asked you this backstage, but I thought it would be more interesting
I think it's
for everybody to hear this live.
Tell your team to renew their subscription to Skift Research, and then we will put you early in the day.
That's fair.
That's the reason.
We didn't renew it? Oh my God!
No, you did. You did, right, Carolyn? They renewed. I think they're all good.
All right, I guess I'll forgive
much.
you. We have some people here. I said to my team, like, is anybody? We're like, that's sort of a rule of thumb. Like, you're between everybody and cocktail hour. Like,
no, it's
people
good.
fade. All right.
The good news is we're just going to relax and talk, and you're going to open up and talk.
I love it. I'm going to tell you anything you want to know.
So,
all my innermost feelings.
So let's start with obviously the Delta variant. And I think in the Q2 earnings call, you said you were you didn't factor into your projections. 2 weeks into September, I guess 3 weeks now, what's your feeling now? Has anything changed, or you're seeing that sort of plateauing out and things coming back?
I would say, sort of big picture, what I talked about on our second quarter call, which was very early in the Delta experience, and a bunch of things have changed, which I'll come back to. But big picture, what I talked about was my faith in the resilience of the business, the underlying demand, both natural and pent-up demand in all segments. We obviously had seen that in leisure like crazy already, but we were really starting to see it in business travel, and we were really starting to see it in the bookings on meetings and events, like these events. And so my big picture view then was, listen, as we get towards the end of this year and into next year, and COVID was still an issue and Delta was early, I think we are on a solid road to recovery, and I have every confidence that we're going to continue to see, pick up in the segments that have been lagging, and that it was a natural consequence of not just a health issue, but a recession that was brought on by a health issue. I've been doing this for longer than I want to admit, but every time you're coming out of a recession, we've seen leisure lead, not quite by this measure, but generally leisure lead, business travel, meetings and events follow. And so, over the pendency of the next 3 or 4 quarters, my view then was, I think we're going to get back to sort of a place where we're pretty much where we were in 19, not in the full year like next year, but on a run rate basis. And I would say, because you asked me a question, I will answer it, I don't really feel any differently today. But if you then dive a little deeper into like where we are at this exact moment relative to what I would have hoped for then, I'd say we're a little bit behind. It does not change my view on the broader trajectory. It does not change my view on what I think on a run rate basis we will achieve next year based on what's going on with COVID and what I see in demand patterns and booking patterns. But I think, and it's impossible to be perfectly scientific. I think what we did is we inserted like 4 to 8 weeks of going through this Delta, spike that is, I think, if you read all the data, feels like is sort of getting under control. Right. And as I go out and talk to customers, I mean, we finished the best leisure season we've ever had in 102 years. So that's pretty healthy. And
And this is just in the strength of the U.S. market.
We finished our best leisure season in the world, but driven by the U.S. market. And we expected August to drop off in business travel. It always does, right? People do go on vacations. They don't travel for business. And it did, but not that much. Not a whole lot different than we expected. And post-Labor Day, it's picking back up. Probably a little slower. If I were being really objective, I would have thought it would pick up a little bit faster The slope would have been a little bit steeper when I talked about it on Q2 than what we're seeing now. But it is, in September, as we get deeper into September, it is recovering. Meetings and events, as I said, it's wonderful to see all of you here. I mean, that is pushed out a little bit because it's easy for people to say, I don't know if should we do this event? Big businesses are saying, I don't want to put people in harm's way. And, they have, risks of bad PR and all that. So that's sort of getting pushed. But my view had been and remains that that's more of we'll get some fourth quarter meetings and events more than we've had, but that's really a 2022 sort of phenomenon.
Yeah.
So, I think we inserted some number of weeks, not, maybe a couple months, but not much more than that. And I think my fundamental optimism, which I think is well-founded on data, about sort of the trajectory of where we're going and how this will play out next year is pretty much what it was.
What about, and I should obviously remind all of you or anybody who's watching online that we will have some time for questions. So go to the app and put your question in, and I'll get all these questions here. So hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those if we have time. So you have a contrarian view to the popular view on business travel.
Do I? Really? I mean, I don't know. It depends who you talk to, I guess. You've had a few people on stage.
Yeah, of course. Brian was here yesterday, and he thinks business travel is not coming.
That supports their business model, and so I'll have a view, I guess, that'll support mine. But here's what I'd say the way to think about business travel is, in the end, I think businesses need to travel. I mean, I run a big business, talk to a lot of people that do, and I can tell you pretty uniformly, regardless of what people say in in Skift and everywhere else, the CEOs that are running big businesses know they need to get people back together in offices more than they have it, and they know that they got to get their people back on the road because they need to build culture, they need to build relationships, they need collaboration, they need innovation, culture building, and all of those things are very, very hard to do digitally. I mean, I don't listen. I've done more digital, virtual Zoom and all that. I'm pretty advanced in that stuff, but I don't know about the rest of you.
Do you enjoy it?
No, I'm exhausted by it. My lower back can't take it anymore because I can't sit in one spot hunched over, my iPad. But I think the fundamental truth is this is a core part of doing business. And it's really interesting to say you never travel and you'll cut back. And of course you will because you've had to cut budgets back. And so that's normal in a recession. And I think it fundamentally will remain true and budgets will increase until people have to deliver alpha. I think it's really great until you're competing on a deal and the other guys go out, they travel, and they have a dinner and they build a relationship, and you lose the business. So it's a competitive world. The one thing that
what about long-haul international
relationships matter, and you cannot build relationships the same way. Particularly new relationships are almost impossible in that format. So my belief is business travel will recover, and as sure as I'm sitting here, I'll pick a mark. 3 years from now, business travel will be greater than it was in 2019. By the way, this summer, before the spike in Delta, it was 75% in our system of prior business transfer. It was 75% of prior levels. And one of the things we do is we filter through our own world. So what's happening is a massive bifurcation in business travel. Small and medium businesses are traveling a lot.
Right.
Big businesses are not because they don't, the risks, the budget cuts, and all that. In our business, and we're at almost, second biggest, one of the biggest in the world, 80% of our business transient travel is small and medium businesses. It's not. We love the big businesses too, for those of you that are out there, but it's the minority of our business. Small and medium businesses don't have the luxury of saying, we're not going to travel. What's happened, I think we are now coming through a health crisis, and we are in a cyclical recovery of business travel because people clearly have cut budgets and all that. And that's why I've said publicly dozens of times that that ultimately, you have to go through a number of budget seasons to get that back. The last thing I'd say, which we sort of talked about in the back, is if you lift way, way up, right, and you go back over the history of time, whether it's leisure travel, business, groups, meetings, the thing that's really driven travel is mobility. okay? Mobility, the demographics of middle class is growing, people wanting more experiences than things in the last 20 years. And in my own view, and, my opinion is that COVID, those that think that sort of, stopped all that are wrong. I think that it stopped it for a while because it sort of had to kill mobility to tackle the problem. But it actually reinforced all the reasons why people want more mobility and want more experiences, and they're going to have the disposable income to do it because the middle classes around the world are going to keep growing. So my underpinning on demand in our business, whether all segments, is you're going to be living in a world of greater mobility. Think about it. Even if, let's say, which I do think people are going to cut back office space needs. We probably will, right? We're going to be more efficient. We'll do hoteling. We'll do all sorts of things. What does that mean? It means more mobility. That means our people, they're not going to work from home. It's going to be work from anywhere. What does that mean? They're going to need to travel more. They're going to work in hotels. They're going to need meeting spaces. They're going to have to come to the home office for a week, a month, just to do training or have some semblance of relationships. It means more mobility, more people moving. The more people move around the world for various reasons, the more we grow our business. And that's the way it's been for 1,000 years, and that's the way it'll be for another 1,000.
Well, we hold the last evening's whole theme was the future of human mobility, which was the point was if the world moves more, which certainly the wave of nationalism would which is happening all around the world, would make you think otherwise. But our speakers yesterday argued that that's a momentary phase, sort of the last gasp.
I agree. I think it's a fool's errand. Not that I'm calling anybody that was here a fool, but I think broadly it's a fool's errand to trend line off of the bottom or the top or anywhere near the top. I mean, because when things are really great, we always trend line that, oh my God, it's a new world order and everything's always going to be good. And when things are really bad and you have these seismic things happening, which are what's happened over the last year and a half is pretty seismic, you sort of, we're human. We sort of trend line, we filter for that, and we sort of trend line off of that. And I think Bill Gates said this.
Recency bias, obviously, as well.
Yeah, we're factoring with a lot of bias, and so that's why I think you got to sort of get through this. We could debate: is more mobility going to be better for leisure, better for business, better for meetings? My view is it's going to be better for everything. Demand levels, demand levels when hopefully you invite me back in a better time slot next time. When I come back in 3 years for the first time slot, if I behave myself and we re-up our subscription or whatever we're supposed to do, I think we'll be saying, I'm hoping, and I think you'll tell me you were right. All your segments, leisure went back is probably a little bit greater than it was, but it's not what it is. I mean, because people do go back to work, kids go back to school, and business travel and meetings and events have had a phenomenal run. Pent-up demand, people understanding more than ever that they need to build relationships, congregate, collaborate, to be able to innovate and drive businesses. So we'll see. Time, if you give me the right slot, we'll come back and you can hammer me if I'm wrong. But yeah. I would bet a lot of money, and that's what history would say. I mean, it's a much more, not as major an event. I mean, if you're here in New York, obviously it is, but 9/11. I remember, in the days following 9/11, nobody was ever going to get on a plane. Why would you ever get on a plane in a world where you could fly into a building? I was running another big hotel company at that time, and it was nobody would get on a plane. You woke up a year later, 2 years later, we came up with coping mechanisms, TSA, better security. Everybody was flying and nobody was thinking twice about it.
Let me ask you this question.
So things, people go back to
doing a lot of things.
Patterns that are, what I was say Bill Gates, famously said a while ago, things change over the long term a lot more than people think, and over the short term a lot less than people think. Yeah. So I sort of share that philosophy, don't trend line. Things aren't going back to where they were. I do think offices are going to be, I think a lot of things are going to be different. But underneath it all, mobility in the world is going to increase. It just has to. People want it, and they're going to get it, and it's going to come in a bunch of different forms that is going to be good for our business.
Speaking of obviously mobility, the travel industry got some great news this week with the U.S. borders reopening. one of my questions that I prepared last week for your team for you to answer was, to Biden administration on opening international travel, what would you advise? And I guess they took the advice before you gave them the advice.
They took the advice. Listen, we've been, as an industry, many people in this room, and myself included, have been working with the administration, both administrations, but yeah, obviously, it hadn't been really ripe until we got enough shots in arms. And I think the guy is COVID czar, I guess they call him COVID coordinator for Biden, so a super close personal friend of mine, so I've been talking to him periodically throughout. And I think appropriately their real thrust has been like, we got to deal with getting Americans vaccinated, and we don't want to have enhance our risk by bringing anybody in that that would slow down the trajectory of sort of getting past COVID, particularly during the Delta wave. But they've done a lot of work, we've done a lot of work, and we've been working with them to point out that you can do this safely. Just like we can all be here and we're vaccinated, so can international travelers come into our country with the right protocols, and we can do it safely in a way that's not, going to change the risk profile for the country. And I think we're at a point where, one, I think they agree with that, and importantly, we're not done, but they've got a lot of shots in arms. When we started talking to them 4 or 5 months ago, or 6 months ago, I mean, honestly, I think it was very hard to have a real conversation, because they just hadn't gotten to the point of vaccination that they were comfortable with it, and they had a very myopic focus, as they should have, on that issue. So I applaud them for doing it. I think it's going to be great. Again, I think there's a ton of pent-up travel. I've been traveling a bit wherever they'll take me. There's not that many places. I was in Europe a couple weeks ago for another conference. IHIF. We had 800 or 900 people there, and it'll be great. It'll be great to get those travelers back, and particularly for our cities. I mean, the reality is, if you look at the data, you look at our numbers, because nobody could leave, like this summer and all that. The numbers were great, as I was saying, because nobody left, so they just they roamed about the country, a lot of drive-to vacations, and it was all pretty good. But the cities, if you look at our system across the U.S. business system-wide, 5% of our business is international. Not that much, maybe 4 or 5. If you look at the big cities, they're not all the same, but on average they're like 20 plus. So it's a big deal for the cities to get the cities back on their feet, and obviously the cities are lagging. The resorts. Are
you seeing any improvement, like for instance New York City?
Some. Slow. I mean, as you would guess, I'd put it in, sort of 3 buckets, like broadly. Resorts, sort of non-city, everything else, and city. And I'm grossly oversimplifying.
Yeah.
And the performance is in descending order of those buckets. The resorts have crushed it. We've had a big steep slope in every, non-city, everything else, because a lot of drive-to business travel. And the cities have been bringing up the tail end. They don't have the international travel, the health issues, and more dense areas, are more concerning. And we've had labor and lots of other things, issues going on in the cities. I think it's just been sort of a combo platter of things. Every city is a little bit different, but they've been lagging. But this is going to help. It's going to help the cities in a big way. And every city's improving. It's just not as fast. Not as fast as everything else.
Speaking of resorts, how did you miss on that Apple Leisure Group deal?
You should ask Mark Kaplamazian. Is he speaking?
No, he's not here this year. But Alex was going to be here.
We look at everything out there. We've obviously not been particularly acquisitive. I don't think that's a mystery.
And why is that?
It's very simple. We don't need to be. I mean, we look at the scale that we have, the network effect that we have as a result of our segmentation, as a result of our geographic diversification, and then the product quality and consistency of service delivery. We put the whole thing together. We've really created what we think is an industry-leading network effect. And I think we can demonstrate that by the fact that we have the highest market share of any of the major global branded players. So I think that's pretty good evidence that it works. And so when we look at M&A, we look at it in the context that we have something that's working really well. We have opportunities to do more things. Like since I've been at the company 14 plus years, we've doubled the size of the brand portfolio. We went from 9 to 18 brands. So it's not like we've been sitting around. We just did it organically. Why did we do it organically? Because we could develop brands that were purpose-built for exactly what we think the modern needs of a customer are, and it's much higher return when we're not buying it and then spending our time fixing other people's problems, which invariably exist in that kind of environment. So we look at everything. We looked at Apple. We've literally anything that's traded, including Starwood back in the day when we were private. We've looked at some of those things we spent a lot of time on, but when we put it through a really simple filter of like strategically, does it enhance our ability to deliver for customers what they want? And economically, is it really accretive to our shareholders as a result of doing it? Pretty much so far, nothing has made it through the filter. Now, at the same time, we've grown faster than everybody, and we've done it organically, and the returns have been phenomenal, right? So, I think we've doubled the, it was a big company when I got here. I think we've doubled the size of the company, doubled the size of the brands, and we haven't bought the first thing. So it's working, right? So it doesn't mean on Skift or other period, that we're not going to be in the front page every day, but that's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to deliver the absolute most reliable, friendly experience for our customers and deliver the best returns for our shareholders. And we are maniacal about it, and that's why we do what we do. Yeah.
So in terms of, you talked about labor, and obviously this is a problem everybody's dealing with, I'm sure, including you. Probably, would it be fair to say one of the top things in your mind?
Definitely.
How do you solve it?
It's complicated. So there's not one answer. I mean, not one simple solution. I would say things are already happening that will help, that will take time. So I think when you look at the labor issue, I think if you think about how we went into COVID, we already had, certainly in some roles on the front line, we already had pressure on labor, particularly in the area of housekeeping, but in other areas as well on the front line. They weren't extreme, but they existed. Then you went into COVID. Then you had health people not wanting to work because of their health issues. People didn't have anybody take care of their kids, and it's a very young workforce, right. And they have children, elderly parents. They have child care, adult care, and then you had a number of things happen from a policy point of view. By the way, all of which I supported heavily, and I would argue in the beginning of the unemployment insurance from the federal government back in March and April of 2020, I would argue the tip of the spear to be pushing for that. But over time, it had some impact in terms of when there was demand and when there were jobs available. It was not helpful, right? And you put sort of all that together. Government will pay me. I don't have anybody take care of my kids. I'm worried about my health. It's a toxic, it's a toxic brute. Now, some of that is resolving itself. Unemployment has ended. The states there, the federal has ended. Almost all schools, are open. Right. We have ubiquitous access to vaccines. We'll see with the OSHA stuff. Likely, eventually, we'll have mandates.
Are you doing a mandate for your employees?
We have not. We're working with the rest of the industry to figure out what OSHA is doing exactly, and then we're going to make judgments. We've done it. We've mandated it in our corporate context, but we have not. As an industry, a number of us, we've all been talking, and the last thing we want to do is come out with something, and then OSHA comes out with their regs 2 weeks from now, and it's something different. So we're waiting. But to finish the point on labor, some of those things are easing, so time is going to help us. And then I think, the greatest, way that we help ourselves is we ultimately take great care of our people, and we have an incredible culture. Number one, great place to work in the United States, multiple years running. Number two in the world. That's because we pay well, we give great benefits, we create a family environment where people want to be in it, and they tell their friends they want to be in it. And so ultimately, long term, that that's why we build a great culture, so we have the best talent that is inspired to serve our customers. We're going to have to help it beyond just kids going back to school and unemployment insurance by figuring out more creative and innovative ways with the use of technology, which we're investing in scheduling, in access to flexible labor and gig labor and much more sophisticated ways, which we've been developing over years for how we're training people so that we realize that while we do this in a limited way, like where we have surge hiring in markets, resorts, different times a year, that, you know, there are going to be a bunch of people that say, like, maybe I don't want to work full-time like I did ever again, or I can't because I got child or, you know, family care of some sort, but I want to work a day or two a week. And we just have to, I think, and we are, as a company, get much more sophisticated about how we do that, how we pay people, how they actually get paid, you know, physically, you know, and using technology that is much more friendly to and much more flexible, scheduling, access to other pools of talent. So we're in the process of doing a bunch of investing and thinking and actually, you know, action to, you know, get more access to labor.
Brian, can you put 5 more minutes on the clock? Sorry, just we're in a zone here. Let's do quick lightning rounds on a few things.
You know I'm not good at lightning, but yes,
we'll
no?
try.
Okay,
We'll try.
I'll
we'll
do
try.
it. I'll do it.
Do you think that the housekeeping not being daily is permanent now in the industry?
Do I think it's what?
Housekeeping not being daily, meaning cleaning of the rooms.
Here's how I think about that. I think that there's you guys I don't think have done it, but a bunch of the other press just got this wrong. My underlying philosophy, and I'm a zealot about this, and I have been for the entire time I've been at the company, is that our job is to deliver the most friendly, like I said, this reliable experiences for customers. And the key way to do that is to give them choice and control, and to be able to do it at massive scale so that you effectively, we serve 200 million people a year, can customize the experience at that level. Why? Because if we take the friction out, we allow them to get the things what they want, the way they want it, in the palm of their hand, like they have for most of the rest of their life, then they're going to be happy. It's going to be a better, more reliable, and more friendly experience, and they're going to stay with us more, and we're going to get a higher market share. And so the answer to the question is what I think doesn't matter because it's an option for the customer. It's choice and control. So ultimately, right now, it's, you know, we are working. It is not in our app, but it will be very soon, and it'll be super frictionless and super easy for people to say, I want it or I don't. And that's a good thing because there are people. My wife, I found this out during COVID. I never knew this. She doesn't like housekeepers in the room in between stays. And like I was like, it was a huge epiphany. I said, are you kidding me? Why? Well, I don't know. I got my stuff. It's all where I want it. I move my stuff around. I like it. But the truth of the matter is there are people on all sides of it. Part of it's COVID, and I don't, the health. But part of it is just that some people, don't want people in the room. And so we're not taking it away. We're just giving them choice and control. You have the choice, and you control if you want it, and we won't decide for you. And think of that thematically in everything we do, right? The more we give people choices and make it super friction-free and give them the control in the palm of their hand, I think the better their stay is going to be. Whether that's in-room technology with our smart room, whether that's the digital key that we led the industry in, and digital room selection where we have the maps, which nobody has. Yeah. Whether that's confirmed connecting rooms.
Yeah, let's ask this question.
Nobody, believe it or not, in the industry has but us. All of those things are choice and control. You can go on the app, you can get that, you can control it. If you don't want it, fine, don't pop the button. If you want it, great. Options, last I checked, optionality is a very powerful thing.
To your question on family travel, what did it took until 2021 for one brand, only one brand, to launch
the funny story about, we of course launched it this summer. I'll give you the answer. And I got, within minutes of it going out, I got a picture of the headline and a text from my wife, and she said, oh, this is really great. Now that our kids are grown up, you finally got off your you-know-what and did this. And I was like, oh, great, thanks. Because my kids I have 6 daughters, they're 18 to 28. She's like, they don't want to be in connecting rooms anymore. And so I thought that was funny. He's like, yeah, sorry, sweetie, we couldn't get our act together. But listen, we're the only ones in the industry who have done it, so that should tell you something. It's not easy. And the reason isn't, and this is what we've been doing, working on for 5 years, and we're at the very tail end, and we accelerated a lot of this work during COVID, ironically, when a lot of people were cutting things, is really just totally reimagining our tech stack. And So all of these, the reason all of these things are hard in the old hotel world, okay, is that you had these two monolithic, archaic systems that everybody has: PMS, property management, and CRS, reservation systems. And they were all, let's be honest, they were old, and while they worked, they were like, I would argue, like shoestrings, bubble gum, duct tape. I mean, they just weren't built for the modern world. You have such, advances in technology. They weren't built for the kind of scale that we now operate in a number of countries and all that. But when you're these big companies, it's hard. Like you're flying. It's like taking a 747 over the. You're trying to repair engines, but you're in flight. You got to make sure you keep the plane in the air. So the industry broadly, I think, has been very slow on that. About 4 or 5 years ago, we said we're getting out of that world. We're going to reimagine the whole thing. We're going to go open source, cloud-based, microservices. We are going to have a tech stack that's as good as any of these startups that that are out there that in the tech world, because we have to, and we're just going to have to make the time and investment and manage our way through it. And while we're not 100% of the way through it, we are. CRS is all done. Open source microservices. It's amazing. We can now atomize inventory. You could have like 26 room type. We can have a billion room types. And we can do all sorts of really cool things. And the PMS probably by realistically middle end of next year will be pretty fully deployed. And then you put all that together. In the meantime, we can do things now just by virtue of where we are. When we get all the way through it, it allows us to plug and play from a microservices point of view all sorts of interesting things like confirmed connecting rooms. But we were able to do it in part because we've made enough progress to connect those dots. And when we get probably a year from now, I think the opportunities are far, far greater. These are little things, I think. Think about a world where you go on and we can atomize our inventory for every single customer. So we know that you want to be, in a high floor, nowhere near the elevators, and you love to, you want a breakfast deal, and we can put together literally a atomized package for your exact need and put it in front of you, and charge appropriately, instead of like making you work, so hard to figure all these things out. But the systems underneath it have to allow it. And so that's why it's taken so long. But we're almost there. I mean, we're there to be able to do a lot of it. We'll be fully there soon.
On that optimistic note, I do have 10 more questions, but we're really out of time.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, we got to let him go have cocktails
I know,
now.
that we really are.
All right, so we have a deal. We'll kick it off.
We will, in 2022. Let's do that. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.